Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Elopkin. And we've been together in terms of broadcasting, both on terrestrial and our podcast. God, could it be like 15 years, Dr. Elopkin?
Almost. It's close to that if it's not 15 already.
Why do I bring that up? I bring it up because it's been a pleasure, but more than that, I don't think I've experienced a more monumental event, maybe the Trump election, than I'm talking 15 years now, my lifetime, than the attack on Israel. Am I Meshuggah?
No, you're not overstating that at all. This was the first time in history that Iran has attacked Israel not through proxies. This was the first time they stepped out of the shadows and said, yes, we are going to try to destroy Israel. And they let fly drones, cruise missiles, ballistic missiles. This was
not five of them, not five
no,
of them.
300.
There you go. And coordinated that they had the drones go first to flood the zone, followed by ballistic missiles. And what fascinates me, and I want your opinion on this. Obviously, they wouldn't have done it if they thought it wasn't going to be successful. Correct?
No, I'm sure they thought it was going to be successful. Even the way that they launched was very meticulously thought out, because the drones were sent in first. Ostensibly, they thought that was going to overwhelm the Iron Dome so that the missiles could get through. Well, surprise, surprise, not only didn't it overwhelm the Iron Dome, but 99% of the missiles and drones never even made it to Israeli space. Why? Because we had an alliance there that I don't think anybody could have predicted. It was the Israeli Air Force, the U.S. Navy, the United Kingdom, the Jordanian Air Force. Saudi Arabia was providing intelligence. The French got involved. This was unprecedented. And I don't think Iran had any idea that it was going to happen. They certainly didn't expect the Saudis and the Jordanians to stand up to them.
I 100% agree, and that's why I think it's the biggest event in our relationship in terms of what happened in the news. There is no question about it. I think Iran did not see this coming in any way. I thought they're not stupid people. They believe that yes, a lot of the incomings would be defeated, but many would get through. And they thought at the end of the day that +1 for Iran, because they thought there'd be 3 or 4 targets. And let's also discuss, and not to get too technical, when you say 99% of the incoming were taken out, yes, but the ones that got through were drones. It did virtually no damage. So that's even worse. I know it's a technical point, but it is a point. Okay.
Oh no,
ballistic missiles.
It's an important point. Not only was there virtually no damage to Israel, there was only at the most recent reports 1 injury, not even any casualties, 1 injury, and that was a young Arab girl.
Yes. Again, to reiterate the point, strategically and militarily, no ballistic missiles. I agree, and I believe you would too, but I want your analysis, and our listeners obviously would as well. Israel comes out stronger, Iran comes out exponentially weaker. Am I correct or not? And it's not me, it's analysis.
Yeah, no, Iran was the clear loser in this. The simple fact is they thought they were going to overwhelm the Iron Dome and be able to hit several targets around Israel. And it's also important to realize that from what we could tell about the targets, they weren't simply targeting Israeli military. They weren't simply targeting Jewish targets. They were targeting the entire country. Jews, Muslims, they didn't differentiate, they didn't care. And that is also backfiring on them because now you've got other countries in the Middle East who are saying, you know what? No, you're done. You had your shot, you're finished. We are seeing
I
on
think.
we are seeing
Go
on
ahead.
social media photos from within Iran of civilians painting graffiti that is pro Israel. The Iranian Guard, Revolutionary Guard, I believe they're called, made an announcement that if anybody sees Iranians posting on social media pro Israel information, they are to be turned in and they will be prosecuted. So
That's no
they've lost
that is a
control of their own country.
yes. You know something? It's not. That is a great point, Dr. Lotkin, because events exactly like this, what just happened, leads to sea changes. Okay. And what I've learned in my time on Earth is that you can say, you can do, when you have a grassroots movement, it is extremely, if not impossible, to stop. And I think bigger than the technological issues of the Iron Dome or the successes, I should say, when you I don't think Iran had any idea that Saudi Arabia, Jordan, okay, Egypt, France, and I mean, they became instant pariahs. They thought, I think they read the tea leaves 100% incorrectly that Israel was the pariah. We have a free reign. I was shocked. I couldn't believe what happened. I'm happy, but I can't believe it. And I think they they took 30 steps back. And you had a point when we were prepping for this podcast. Technologically, also a failure. Iron Dome, the West, you could say knocking out proves a lot of things, and that can be a whole different podcast. But a significant amount of their incoming or outgoing, I should say, didn't work. And where is it from?
Yeah, Iran has been getting their weapons from China, and a large percentage of them blew up on launch pads, blew up before they ever left Iranian space. So, what does that mean other than for Iran? Well, it's got to make Taiwan feel pretty good because now they're going, well, wait a minute, the Chinese weapons don't even work that well.
And it's got to give a little pause to China, more than a little, that their shit ain't all that great. And when you look at the West, yeah, the West, the feeble West and the weak West and the woke West has some kick-ass shit. Sorry, it's just true.
Yes, and you mentioned, Iran reading the tea leaves wrong. I'm not so sure that they were 100% wrong. I think they were reading Biden's playbook because Biden has been pulling away from defending Israel more and more since October 7th. And I thought Iran was under the impression that he was not going to back them. And if America didn't back them, certainly Europe wouldn't. But when the US
100%.
when the US actually had to engage, there was no doubt whose side we were on. And the fact of the matter is, we just saw over the last few days massive pro Hamas, pro terrorist protests, shutting down the Golden Gate, shutting down the Brooklyn Bridge, shutting down parts of Chicago. Well, the fact of the matter is, as much noise as these people are making, they're still only a very small percentage of the United States. They're a small
But they're a
percentage
quarter of
of
the Democratic Party,
they are
Dr. Lopkin.
according to recent polls, they represent 23% of the Democratic Party. And while that is dangerous, especially for the Democrats, it's less so for Israel because the Democrats themselves only represent 30% of America based on recent polls. What we've seen is that 30% of the US identifies as Democrat, 30% identifies as Republican, and the remaining 40% identify as independent. Now, of course, they'll lean one way or the other, but the fact that only 23% of Democrats representing only 30% of the US means these guys can be as loud as they want. They are not going to affect our foreign policy. They are not
They
going
thought
to
no, no,
affect
but
Israel.
you have a great point. But can you comment, please, on maybe both synonymously the the quarter of the Democratic Party, the pro-Hamas squad, and Iran, things were kind of going their way, weren't they? Both monumental miscalculations. I believe the Iranian attack also put cold water on the pro-Hamas Democrats. Your thoughts?
It's starting to, but I don't know how much the actual attack had to do with it. I think it's more to do with the fact that they overstepped and now people have had it with them. The California Highway Patrol announced after this last round of protests earlier this week that they are not going to take this anymore. And if these protesters block roads, they are all going to be arrested. This is liberal California saying this, that they've had it with the protesters. So I think they went a bridge too far. They pushed their luck. They thought they were going to have more support. And I think a lot of this, the failure of the protesters, Iran miscalling what was going to happen, the stepping up of the Arab countries in the Middle East, all of this, I think, has its roots in the fact that everybody on both sides underestimated the power of the Abraham Accords.
Yes. Donald J. Trump, correct?
Yes. I have heard so many Democrats go, "Oh, the Abraham Accords didn't mean anything. They were symbolic. They didn't, they weren't going to affect anything." Guess what? They just affected world politics in a big way.
Huge way, monumental, Camp Davidish. How do you like that one? And the only thing I didn't hear, I heard some crickets. Where was Chucky Schumer on this? I didn't hear any reaction about the Israeli response success, I should say.
No,
Who was Chucky?
I didn't hear anything from him. In fact, it has been radio silent for the most part from most of the Democrats. They have come out and their almost unified statement has been, okay, now don't strike back. Now you have to stand down. We know they threw literally no exaggeration here, $1 billion worth of armaments were fired at Israel. We know they just spent $1 billion to try to wipe you out, but you can't do anything.
Actually, it's really interesting as well. I'm talking from a military standpoint that they can't replicate that in the near future. They threw everything but the kitchen sink at Israel. So what happens next, Dr. Eric E. Lobkin? What does Israel do? What do you think the right thing to do for Israel? Do they take the advice of Uncle Joe and the Democrats, or they refer to the Old Testament?
I think they split the difference. They have to strike back But I don't think there is actually a need for a massive military strike. What most people are unaware of is the fact that Israel is home to the best hackers in the world. They're the ones that used hackers to shut down Iran's nuclear facilities in the past. I think Israel needs to unleash those hackers and shut down all of Iran's infrastructure.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Dr. Eric E. Lopkin, that would be another that would be another five pegs down for Iran because you're elevating the playing field in Israel's favor. And by the way, Israel, I think, is maybe in the top three software development countries in the world, if not the number
Yes.
one. I mean, number two besides America. That what a talk about vulnerability and a sea change.
It,
Lotkin,
it would
amazing.
it would be a sea change. And also, if you eliminate the infrastructure, there's nothing Iran can do to strike back. In fact, quite frankly, unless Israel claimed responsibility, there probably wouldn't even be any way to prove that Israel did it. But it would also give the dissidents within Iran the power to strike back when there is no infrastructure for the ruling class to use. That's when these dissidents can strike back. And let me tell you something, there is actually a very strong dissident movement within Iran. So, despite the fact what these idiot pro Hamas protesters are yelling here in the US, Iran's own people do not like the ruling class. They
Let me
want.
interject one thing, Dr. Eric E. Lotkin. Yes, it was going back to 2010, okay? And who screwed it up? The enabler of Iran. There was a real sea change going around in Iran, but who kind of put cold water on it? It's a little rhetorical question. It's
Yeah,
Barack Hussein Obama, the one who
yes,
gave them the drone technology. There you go.
yes.
And the money.
If our listeners remember, there was the huge Arab Spring that hope actually sprung that there were going to be pro democracy people in the Middle East for a change. And the Obama administration empowered Iran rather than empowering the dissidents. And that's what got us where we are. Now, Iran's military, and they knew, Iran has known this for quite a while, has never been up to the task of taking out Israel. That's actually why they have struck through Hamas, through Hezbollah, through the Houthis, because they knew their military was not up to the task. They have spent the last 3 years. And yeah, it's not a coincidence that they started this after Trump left office.
Oh, there you go.
But
Surprise,
they,
surprise.
yeah, they spent the last 3 years building up their military to the point where they thought they were going to actually be able to take out Israel. And this was the result. The 300 missiles and drones, $1 billion worth of weaponry, and it all turned out to be useless.
Can I talk more about the psychological impact, if you
Sure.
will?
Yeah.
The machismo impact. As someone who's a supporter of Israel, starting a little bit by the Kool-Aid that there's a power shift in the Middle East, shifting more towards Iran. I think this whole thing, no pun intended, blew that out of the water. I think people were intimidated to go against, I'm talking countries and dissidents within Iran, to go against this regime. I think it's Katie by the door now. I really do believe that. They went a bridge too far or a couple bridges too far, and now they're exposed for not a weak country, but not ready for prime time. I think they've invited a lot of pushback on this disgusting regime. People like Saudi
I,
Arabia, Jordan, they're not going to be shaking in their boots anymore.
well,
And that's huge. That's not minor.
again, I think that actually goes back even further. Remember, on October 6th, Saudi Arabia and Israel were in peace talks. Saudi Arabia was going to join the Abraham Accords. I think that is where this whole thing started, was the Abraham Accords. It backed Iran into a corner. And that was why Hamas attacked on October 7th, because Iran wanted to derail the Saudi Israel talks. Now, everybody is saying, oh, guess what? Iran doesn't have any military power. As long as we can keep them from getting a nuclear weapon, which, again, the Israeli hackers are completely capable of doing. US has hackers that can do it. We tend not to use our hackers properly, though. And let's just be very clear about this, because every time there's a major hacking incident, you hear the FBI release these statements saying, oh, the resources necessary for this said it has to be a national effort. There has to be a country behind this. There's no, most of these hacking efforts could be done by a dozen high school students with a case of Red Bull. These are not difficult hacks for real hackers.
Well, hey, let me just say something about a comment and want your comment on it as well. I think it's bigger than this. I think that now Iran is exposed with their nuclear endeavors, because it was this, and I study a lot of military and world politics, and it was this monumental feat for Israel to knock out the Iranian nuclear program, and all this hell to pay and blah, blah, blah. That's gone. Not just with Israel, I'm talking with other players in the Middle East. Nope, the emperor has no clothes. There's still a power to be reckoned with, but they're not in, let's just say, in less than a week, they went from first class to luggage.
Yeah, you know what this is like? If you remember back to the Iraqi war, when the US military was about to go into Iraq, there was all of this myth around the Iraqi Revolutionary Guard. These were Iraqis elite. We were going to have to fight them, and we were concerned about what the blowback was going to be. And the
biggest army.
And the Revolutionary Guard folded within 3 days. Now we're seeing that Iran was in the same situation. They talked big, it was a big image, but there was nothing there to back it up. And right now, I honestly believe the only thing that is still keeping Iran in the game and keeping Iran being an international threat, and let's not make light of this, they are still an international threat. But what's keeping them as a threat is Joe Biden, and the fact that he is trying to kowtow to the protesters and the pro-Hamas wing of the Democrats, because he would rather try to unite the party behind terrorists so he can win re-election than he is interested in doing what's right for the world.
Has he ever been in? Okay, this is a fact. This is a fact that even when he was not senile and he was head of the Senate Intelligence Agency, he literally went to Reagan, not directly, the Reagan administration. Essentially, you don't do what I want, I'll leak sensitive information. This guy's never, and that's the truth, this guy's never had any scrutiny or any morals. He'll do whatever. He's always been a political carpetbagger, and it's no surprise to me.
No, he's a political animal. And again, we've quoted this over and over again. Robert Gates, Secretary of Defense under Barack Obama, stated point blank that Joe Biden has been wrong on every foreign policy decision for the last 50 years. Why should he be right? Why should he stop now?
The only thing he's done right is when he was a professor at UPenn. He was an outstanding professor out there. There you go.
Yes, according to his own autobiography.
I'm sure. So we have the Trump trial. Fascinating as well. I'm not as concerned about. I'm concerned, but not as concerned. A couple things that I'll throw out there for your comment on. I don't think he's going to be convicted. I don't know if he's going to get acquitted, but I definitely think a hung jury easily, right? Because there's really no case here. But the thing that's really fascinating is that he's in New York, which is within 10. And then this is shocking to me, but I wish Connecticut could get their shit together. But anyway, within 10, which means he's really within 5. And he went to the Borrego after the trial. And
Bodega.
Bodega, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
They juxtaposed of Uncle Joe, right, in Scranton talking about, I don't know what the hell, I'm a pretty smart guy, but I have no idea what he was talking about. I don't think he did. He fucking slurred his words about instead of something, he talked about taking a shit somewhere. Jesus. Seriously, look at it. And you had a real, basically organic show of support in an highly ethnic and underprivileged area. Your thoughts? Traditional Democratic stronghold, not just stronghold, like can't get better than 90%, 95 Democrat. So trial first, and then if I was an advisor of Trump, I'd say every day after the trial, I would go to Harlem. I would go to all these areas, traditional Democratic areas, turn, lemons into lemonade and just go right in your face. Your thoughts?
Yeah, the trial is having some interesting side effects that I don't think the Democrats had counted on. And not the least of which is the fact that Alvin Bragg is in the court. Now, the courts right now, criminal cases, because of the pandemic and the courts being closed down, are still backed up for years. There are basically the DAs, the AGs, they're focusing on violent crimes and not recent violent crimes. These are violent crimes from 2020, 2021, who they're finally getting to put on trial. Is Bragg going after any of these violent felons? No. He's spending his time manufacturing charges against Donald Trump. So Bragg seems to have forgotten that he's also an elected official. And what we saw in Harlem when Trump went to the bodega, we saw people swarming out of their homes, out of their businesses to see him, to yell their support for him. They were enthusiastic to see him. Why?
Because genuinely,
yes,
genuinely is a huge point too. If it's some artificial, like an Uncle Joe who could only get 10 people, you'd have to pay him $100 each. But this was not. This happened organically.
Yeah, and for the most part, people did not know he was coming. So this was spontaneous. And why is he getting this kind of hero's welcome? Because they see him being persecuted when the crime in their own neighborhoods is being ignored by Bragg. So they see
100%.
they see
And could it
this.
also be connected to long-standing and at certain times accurate, basically injustices in the African American and minority communities? I've heard interviews, and it's not obviously statistically significant, but of African Americans say, yeah, he's got like street cred. Like they've made him a hero. They didn't design it that way, obviously, but your thoughts? He's kind of he's got it.
Yeah, the constant lawfare has made Trump the victim. And people are seeing this in the African American communities. You're talking about Harlem. We saw it last week in Georgia when he went down to the Chick-fil-A.
Yes, that was excellent.
People are coming out for him. They are cheering. One woman at the Chick-fil-A actually said, "Don't believe the media. We support you." So they're seeing the media lying about them, and we've seen it over and over again where the polls are saying that African Americans are switching, Hispanics are switching to back Trump. And you see the left wing pundits going, well, this must be an outlier. There's no way Trump could take these audiences away.
Wait, let me interject one thing. Dr. Lopkin, I have to interject one thing on this. They're the racists. You know why? Because they have such a loathing opinion, such an elitist opinion of blacks and Hispanics that they think they're so stupid that they don't understand, or they just going to vote, uniformly, even though their businesses are getting screwed, they are getting screwed. Illegals, migrants are getting, in the front of the bus, to quote Rosa Parks, ahead of them. In other words, they're not looking at them as people. They're looking at this voting block, and they are people with emotions and economic and social interests that the Democratic Party is 180 degrees against them. That's just how it is.
Exactly. They are seeing that the Democrats, who they have supported loyally for decades, have done nothing for them. Where there was great movement in both the Hispanic and African American communities under Trump. In fact, both of those communities hit historically low unemployment rates. Under Biden, he keeps yelling about his progress with unemployment, but when you look at the numbers, that progress is mostly white male. So they're not delivering for these minority groups, and the minority groups have seen, oh, they don't care about us. And now, because they went after Trump, they're identifying with him.
Well said. I find it absolutely fascinating. And isn't it fascinating that Uncle Joe, I'm sure, obviously he didn't think of it himself, he's talking about country club Republicans and country club Trump. That's like 30 years ago, dude. Okay, it's the elitist party is a Democratic party, not the Republican. Yeah, the country club Republicans. Yeah, but for Uncle Joe, that's when he last had a cognitive thought.
All right, I was about to say, in fairness to Joe, that's probably the last thing he remembers.
Yes, you had, Biffy and Buffy at the country club, and they were all kind of like rhino Republicans, but that train completely left the station. Very, very interesting. And speaking of interesting things, but by the way, before we move on from the trial, I think without this trial, Trump wins in a landslide. There's not even any question in my mind what effect is it going to have. I know it's very premature, but that's why you're Dr. Eric E. Lopkin.
Yeah, the trial.
First of all, before you even analyze it, do you agree with me? Without these trials, Trump wins in a landslide.
Oh, Without the
Not
trials,
even
it's
close.
not close.
It's
It's
over.
Biden has to run on one of two things. He has to run on his record, or he has to run on Trump is a threat to democracy and we have to stop him. And you know,
And by the
and
way, RFK Jr. had the perfect soundbite if you're the Republicans or Trump when he went on CNN. Aaron Burnett, who I don't know how she has her job, but anyway, who cares about that? Basically, explicitly saying, and rightfully so, that Biden is more of a threat to democracy. And Uncle Joe, the nicest guy in the world, lunch pail Scranton Joe, he won't give Secret Service protection to a Kennedy.
yeah, that's
To a Kennedy.
you know,
Really?
it's one thing to deny Secret Service protection to a third party candidate who is polling within the margin of error, 1%, 2%. It is a whole other thing to withhold Secret Service protection from a candidate who, first of all, in many polls is doing 10 to 15%, and who in many polls has a higher favorability rating than either Trump or Biden. Toss into the equation that he's a Kennedy. His father was killed. His uncle was assassinated. Really, if there's any candidate that needed Secret Service protection, it would be RFK Jr.
Yeah, but I thought Uncle Joe was lunch. He's the nicest guy in the world, isn't he?
That image has left the building. I think even diehard Democrats have started to realize that he was never lunch pail Joe. Yeah, he's out yelling about raising taxes today. That's one of the things he's talking about on his swing through Pennsylvania, and how the rich need to pay their fair share, and we're going to raise the taxes on the wealthy. Meanwhile, neither his son nor daughter had paid their taxes.
Oh, well, a minor discretion, no big deal. Yes. What do you think of this concept? At first, I thought it was absolutely horrific that Trump's got to be in a courtroom, which I think is obviously not good, and Uncle Joe gets it. But then I saw Uncle Joe in Scranton. I'm thinking, wait a second. That old adage, you give someone enough rope to hang themselves, they'll do it. I mean, if he's got the spotlight, it's Elvis 1975. I mean, he's got the spotlight and he's talking about taking a shit instead of doing whatever he was supposed to be talking about and about referencing who God knows what. It might work to Trump's advantage. I mean, is that so crazy?
It's not crazy.
Because they got to report. They can't have Trump on the campaign trail and misconstruing what he says about bloodbaths. They got to have Uncle Joe in Philadelphia talking about, I have no idea what, you couldn't pay me enough to figure it out. And I think it might hurt him. Is that just wishful thinking?
No, the more Joe is out in public, the worse it is for him. Now, I don't know that Trump is actually going to be forced to stay off of the campaign trail. Already, the judge has started to backtrack because he got a lot of blowback in the media, on social media, about the comment that Trump could not attend Barron's graduation.
Which is ridiculous.
The judge has backtracked on that, saying, oh, that's not what I said. I haven't decided on that yet, so we will see. So I think the judge is already starting to realize he backed a loser.
Say that. No, you need to articulate that more. Talk about that.
This entire trial was jury rigged together for political purposes. You have a local statute that was past the statute of limitations, so that could not be prosecuted. You had a national statute
The
that
feds already looked into
right
it.
that
Yes.
the feds looked in the feds looked into and said there's nothing there. Two, Bragg doesn't have the jurisdiction to prosecute. The only way he was able to get this all together is because he's claiming that there is an election law crime. Now, during discovery, generally, people on trial are told what the charges are against them. All of that has to be revealed. To this date, Bragg has not come forward with any credible crime to tie this together. Like Adam Schiff claiming, I have ironclad evidence that Trump has been colluding with Russia. Bragg keeps saying, I have this federal charge that ties this all together, and the American people haven't seen any of it. Why?
Well, I
Because
had
it
one comment.
doesn't
Hold on. I had one.
exist.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I
Go ahead.
said, why
Sorry.
haven't people seen it? Because it doesn't exist.
Well, where's the New York bar? What happened to them? They don't comment on it?
Well, the New York bar does have a policy of not commenting on legal trials while they're in.
Egregious.
It is egregious, and it's actually becoming comedic, which I think also works in Trump's favor. During jury selection, the first day of jury selection on Monday, Trump was dozing off in the courtroom, and a New York Times reporter reported this. Afterwards, she started saying, "Oh, well, Trump must not have liked what that I said he was falling asleep because he stared at me." And all I could think of is this reporter is basically a 5-year-old going, "Mom, he's looking at me." This is
Well, also, wait a second. You can't have it both ways. Either he's asleep or he's looking at you.
right. You know, it's
yeah, I'm asleep, but I'm driving my car. Okay, whatever. Yeah, I don't know. I was just fascinated with his trip to Harlem. I think it's extremely interesting. And again, at first I thought it was really, really, really an issue. I'm not so sure, especially after I saw Uncle Joe in Scranton, part of my old sales territory, by the way, when I first got out of college. Yeah, Uncle Joe and thinking, bring it on. The more you people, I mean, you can't edit it down to 1 second. Even NBC can't do that. It's unbelievable. Now, speaking of the media, we have NPR. It used to be called National Palestinian Radio. Now it's whatever it is. You just said during the prep they fired this guy, right? I thought they just put him on NPR. They call it corporate.
NPR suspended the edit.
Yeah, I know that. Okay.
Right. The editor that called them out on their very biased reporting.
No.
What has happened since then is that excuse me, the financial editor, who his name is Yuri Berliner. Now, he came out with a massive article saying point blank that, and this was in the Free Press, so you can go look it up, that NPR's coverage of Russiagate, the COVID lab leak theory, Hunter Biden's laptop, they embraced the theory of systemic racism, and he accused them of downplaying anti-Semitism following October 7th. NPR suspended him for making this public, and he has since resigned.
No, NPR. They're all from Ivy League institutions. It's all free love, free speech, a la 1968. What happened? He's just speaking his opinion. Why would you fire him?
Well, I mean, he wasn't even speaking opinion. He was stating fact. He
Well,
also,
fact has
you
nothing to
know,
do with the Democratic Party. He was
he
talking out of school, wasn't he? And that's
he
a criminal capital offense.
he also pointed out that in the newsroom, out of 87 reporters and editors, there were 87 Democrats and
Oh
no
no.
Republicans. And
Okay, well,
what's really funny is that Berliner was smart enough to position this as an issue of diversity because there is no
I didn't know that. That's awesome.
because
That's
there is
awesome.
no diversity in the NPR newsroom. Everybody thinks alike, everybody talks alike. And this is the same thing we just saw with MSNBC when NBC News hired the former head of the Republican
Mhm.
National Committee. And in unison, they went, "No, she can't work here. She's not one of us."
Imagine doing that in a corporation. Like, imagine if it was like we can't have this person. She's not like us, or he's not like. I mean, my God. And Bill O'Reilly. I don't agree with him on this point. I think he's a very smart guy. He says that NBC News is forever ruined for that. I don't agree with that, but it certainly doesn't help them. And I'm sorry. You can watch CNN. I don't watch it. Okay. Um, Not the greatest thing I've ever seen, but you don't have to be retarded to watch that. MSNBC, I would have to say the average IQ is probably around 8. If you're going to watch that dribble, and it's not just bias. I mean, I'd watch like some intellectual, you know, something on the left, which is becoming infrequently as we speak. But to watch that Joey Bear, whatever her name is, oh my God, it's like it's
It,
unbelievable. That was once something I actually watched was MSNBC like 15 years ago. It was pretty decent.
Yeah, it is amazing what has happened to the media and how they have coalesced. But now you're starting to see cracks. And this actually made me laugh out loud because, Al Roker, who almost
Yeah.
everybody knows as the weatherman on NBC's Today Show. Now,
A man's a candidate.
Al Roker has his own production studio. And right now, they were putting something together, and it's all weather related. That's what they focus on. They were putting together a series for PBS. So you've got somebody who works for NBC News putting together a project for PBS. Al Roker's production studio is now being sued by somebody who claims they were violating diversity regulations and DEI mandates from PBS. So you have a production studio owned by an African American being sued because they were in violation of DEI.
Well, speaking of being in violation, the new head of NPR is in violation of having a brain. Don't really know, don't really care what her name is. They did a debrief on her tweets and texts. This lady is nuts. Not just left, she's insane. And she's such an elitist. Like, oh, I had a fantasy last night of having Brie and Chardonnay with Kamala. It's like, what planet are you on? And something about, yes, I take the train because, like, I'm sure she's never had to work a day in her life. I can guarantee I don't really care enough about her to do the debrief. Went to some Ivy League school, yeah, daddy and mommy. She never had to work in any kind of tough job, and she has no clue with reality. I love that. Like, oh, fantasy, see Brie and Chardonnay with my
Well,
Camilla.
we're
Yeah,
going
okay,
we're
genius.
going to see what happens because on just to give a little background to our listeners, NPR and PBS, everybody talks about the government funding for NPR and PBS. The government does not actually directly fund NPR and PBS. What the government does is they fund something called the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Yes.
And then NPR and PBS get grants from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Well, Senator Marsha Blackburn is already looking into ways to stop funding for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Please make it stop.
And
Please.
it looks like it's gaining traction, not just among Republicans, but there are also some moderate Democrats, such as John Fetterman, such as Joe Manchin, who are looking at this going, you know what? These are just become puppets of the Biden administration. Yeah, we need to defund them. So there is actually a possibility that NPR and PBS could lose a lot of money coming from the government.
They should lose all of it. They need to stand on their own 2 feet. Let the Silicon Valley elites, the New York elites, prop them up, and they can listen to their own effing echo chamber. But I can't even listen to them. We talked about this when we were in terrestrial radio. I used to listen to Wait, Don't Tell Me and Car Talk. I can't even go down the dial. It would make me throw up.
Well,
disgusting.
For those of our listeners who haven't been with us since terrestrial radio, the original Carnivore Radio was on an NPR affiliate.
But didn't they fire us, as far as I know?
They got rid of us because they did not like the fact that we were speaking out against the Democratic policies. So they got rid of us.
I thought the network was all about free speech until I got the pink slip. I couldn't understand it. I was in shock.
Well, I mean, just to give our listeners a good indication of what working at a NPR affiliate is actually like. On the day after, or couple days after, actually, was the Friday after the 2016 election, when Trump took office, we were talking about the election. That was all we were talking about, because that was the big story. And it was not just Jeff and myself. We had Marty Keena, who was a diehard liberal, who was part of the show, and the three of us were talking about the election. And when the show was over, we opened the studio door to find a little sign posted calling us Nazis.
Yep, there you go. I remember that. And it wasn't so little. Yes, it was like walking out, and actually, I don't really care. I could care. It's the best thing ever happened to me, really. But we will go into that later. But it was like we were actually just digesting how it happened. We weren't even getting into politics that much, like, because Trump wasn't supposed to win and blah, blah. We weren't getting into any, yeah, he's the greatest guy ever.
No, we were not supporting him.
Politics.
Right. We were not supporting him. We were not taking his side of it. We were as amazed as anybody else was that he won. So we were analyzing what happened in the election. But this is what the media has come to. And I will also say, I will not use names because he would not want me to use his name. But we have had an author on the podcast who, when he promoted his appearance on the podcast, asked me to edit out everything except his appearance, because if his publisher had found out that the podcast wasn't a left-wing podcast, he felt that he was in danger of losing his publishing contract.
And he's probably correct, by the way.
Yeah. So
he's probably correct.
This is what the media landscape has become. Freedom of speech has gone out the window. A variety of ideas has gone out the window. It is toe the party line or get thrown out.
as we experience, we got the pink slips together. That's all good. It's a bonding experience. But some of these people from NPR, they go to these elitist schools, and I used to be Mr. College, and how could you not go to college, you dumbass? And it's funny, I saw a report that 45% of college grads, it used to be not in their field. That's completely fine.
Right.
Not an issue. But making below what you would if you didn't have a college degree. And the unemployment rate for many degrees, not all, obviously, like pharmacy, engineering, but a lot of degrees are above the national average. We've talked about this probably starting terrestrial radio, I'd have to say.
Yes.
I'm not sure the whole college gig is like blowing up.
No, the problem is colleges are no longer places of education, places of exploring ideas. They've become places of indoctrination. And you said, certain degrees now have higher unemployment rates than non-college graduates. Those degrees are primarily liberal arts and non-STEM. If you get a STEM degree, you're golden.
That's 100% correct.
This actually cracked me up. AOC made a statement a few weeks ago about Biden forgiving student loan debt. And she actually said it is a fantastic idea to forgive the student loan debt because this will allow the students to go back to school to get more degrees.
Wait. I need to say one thing. BU, which is basically pay to play. I'm sorry, I hate to burst your bubble. Okay, you got the check. We're good to go. The more she talks, shouldn't it be more of a movement to kind of basically decredit that place?
They should.
Please, come on, just make it stop. Make it stop.
In the same statement, she also said that the burden of her student loan debt was why she didn't go to medical school, because she couldn't take out more loans. Like she had any chance of passing the GMATs.
She couldn't pass an SAT. Unbelievable. And she was also the one that said RICO is not a crime.
Right.
The girl genius. Yes. Amazing. So we do have the Google. The only woke that hasn't gone broke. But anyway, they had a big brouhaha. Again, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, you name the list. I'm sure there's others behind the scenes, supporting Israel. But our own Google had a big display about, we shouldn't go forward with this initiative with Israel. And some of them had the gay pride flag. I know they went to Ivy League schools, but could you please inform them, Dr. Lopkin, what would happen to them if they were parachuted into Iran? Just please help them, as a public service.
Yeah.
As a public, you're a nice guy. Help them out.
Let's just clarify this. It wasn't Google that was protesting against Israel. It was a group of Google employees who were trying to stop Google from working with Israel. Now, these employees have absolutely no idea what goes on in the Middle East. First of all, yes, they're promoting gay pride. If they did this in Palestine, they would be beheaded. Second of all,
wait. There'd be no, hold on. There'd be no encounter group. There'd be no discussion. It would be later dude or dudette or whatever you want to call it. Yes, there you go.
Yes. And what was really funny is they were also saying that, Iran was right to bomb Israel. Iran is a victim in this. And Iranian activists called them out on this, saying, where have you been when the Iranian government has been persecuting us? When the Iranian government took away all the rights of women? But they think the Iranian government are the victims. These are folks that have no clue what the real world is like.
Well, hold on, hold on. I have to say this. Doesn't this go into not in totality, but to some degree, why? Well, I see this guy at the reservoir. He's retired. He basically was talking about his brother as a big, tech firm. He does not hire Ivy Leagues. He goes because they don't fit in. Doesn't this speak volumes of why these elitist institutions, if you're going to hire he or she, someone that's going to get it done, I ain't going to UPenn. I'm telling you the truth.
No, you are absolutely right. And in fact, we've talked about this in the past. Both Google and Apple have said you do not need a college degree to work for us. You
But
can
it's
get
even worse than that because I think it's not this. I look at an Ivy League degree. Yes, okay. Who even knows now? What was what and how you got in. Okay, but I'd rather have. I'll tell you, someone from Southern Connecticut State University, some blue collar he or she that worked at a gas station that knows the real world, decent student. Yeah, I don't need Biffy and Buffy from Harvard who never did shit for their whole life. I don't need that crap in my office with wokeism and all this other kind of crap. I don't need it.
no, and you are seeing a big pushback. I have actually spoken to a number of employers about intern programs, and they swear by getting interns from, you mentioned Southern Connecticut, another one is University of New Haven. They've talked about getting interns from the community colleges around the country, all with glowing results. Not one of them has had a good result from getting an intern from the Ivy League.
Who needs a crap about this? You say we need to get this done like tomorrow. We have to do this. This is a toxic environment. I feel like a Palestinian. It's like, oh God, please, just make
Good.
it
Don't.
stop.
You know what? You feel it's a toxic environment. You feel that you feel like a Palestinian and you're being, held down. Guess what? Don't come back. You're fired. It's as
There you
simple.
go.
It's as simple as that. If you
Yeah, we
cannot
should.
get the job done, you are of no use to the organization.
But I think it's a real thing. It's not just hyperbole. That if I'm looking at a Southern Connecticut State U grad, I know he or she's going to get it done. They haven't been sitting in their in their bedroom doing Google searches while Daddy works and puts them through school. I don't need. I'm not so sure it's them just me. I don't need the crap. I don't
I'll,
need about we need to be woke and we need to be inclusive and no. I just want to get a job done. I don't need this crap.
I'll be honest, it's even more than that. I am right now working with a group of companies, all of which have decided that they are refocusing their intern programs and their recruitment focus on high schools. They're not
There
even
you go.
looking at college students anymore because they have to spend too much money getting these college students to unlearn what they were indoctrinated with in college. And it's cheaper and more effective for them to hire right out of high school, train them in what they need to know to do their job, and watch these kids succeed.
You know something, Dr. Eric E. Lopkin? That is brilliant because I actually think that makes, forget about the political ramifications or implications. It's it makes business sense because it really speaks volumes and it's true. It's no BS. That you just got to unlearn shit. What's the point? You got to pay them more. I'd rather have a bright mind that can be molded, that has a work. I don't need someone that's talking about like Palestinian issues or DEI. I don't need that crap. 4 years of bullshit. You just got to unlearn it. Isn't that a
All right,
sad
and
commentary
you
on
know,
higher education?
again, forget about the politics, forget about the
It's not about
indoctrination.
politics.
The fact of the matter is, our higher education system has failed its students by not teaching them what they need to know. And we
There
are
you go.
seeing this, and the students know this because right now there is record enrollment at technical schools
Why
because
wouldn't you?
they know you can get a degree in plumbing, you can be trained as an electrician, as a carpenter, and make great money. There was an article just the other day, I forget who it was, it might have been Fortune or Entrepreneur, interviewing someone who is making $200,000 a year working as a manager at Walmart. No college degree, and they're loving their life because they don't have to take their work home with them. They do their job, they do it well, they get paid well, and they've got the money they need to take vacations and enjoy their lives.
Yeah, I think it's a really fascinating, probably for a whole other discussion, but I think it is fascinating because I love social trends. I know you do as well. I think the college thing is going to be completely turned on its ass. All I'll say about you talk about the $200,000. A friend of mine had his air conditioning was like a year ago, whatever. During a hot spell, his air conditioning crapped out, and the guy basically did him a favor to come over and basically said, believe it or not, he makes close to 300 grand a year. And also, what the
Oh,
world
yeah.
does not need is another marketing manager, even if you're getting into real degrees. Yeah, that and 50 cents will get you a cup of coffee. There you go.
No, we need more tradespeople. And
There
fortunately,
you go.
kids are starting to realize there is no stigma in working with your hands. You can make a fortune doing it as long as you put in the time and do the job well.
Well, last thing before we go, Dr. Eric E. Lopkin is talk about doing the job well or not well, the Mayorkas impeachment. Your final thoughts on that, Dr. Eric E. Lopkin?
Mayorkas, you know, he's a
A
symptom.
moron.
He's a moron, but he's a symptom. He didn't take it upon himself to make any of these policies and to do these things. He's working at the behest of the Biden administration. He's doing what they tell him to do. Honestly, I don't think the impeachment's going to go anywhere. I think
No.
it's been a complete waste of time.
Yes.
Should he be held responsible for the complete failure of his job? Absolutely, but this wasn't the way to do it.
100%. Probably should have been much better to have him in some way reprimanded in front of both houses. It would have been better. But yes, but he has no moral compass. Welcome to the democratic society. If he had any kind, he should have resigned because what he did was treasonous. Sorry, it was.
Let's not let's
Probably
not
should have
forget.
been censured. And go ahead.
Let's not forget that Mayorkas was a holdover of the Obama administration.
Oh,
You know,
shocking!
yeah,
No.
it's he's a political animal, the same as the rest of the administration. So he does what he's told. He does what's politically expedient, which included, by the way, lying to Congress, which is actually an impeachable offense. But I don't think Schumer is going to allow any evidence to actually be presented.
That's shocking too. Dr. Lopkin, I think, in my humble opinion, one of our better shows over the last several months. I really enjoyed that, Dr. Lopkin.
Well, there was a lot to talk about this week.
Yes, there was. And our listeners can give their input, can't they?
Yes, let us know what you have to say. Go to the Carnivore Radio Facebook page, message us, let us know what you're thinking. You can also go to xvadio.com/connect, send us your opinion. And of course, you can catch every episode of Carnivore Bites at xvadio.com, the Carnivore Radio website, the Apple Podcasts app, Google, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and other platforms that respect freedom of speech.
See you next week, Dr. Lopkin.
We'll see you then.